We need to see it as, above all, an existential crisis. And as long as it's not being treated as a crisis, we can have as many of these climate change negotiations and talks, conferences as possible. It won't change a thing. If you're doing everything you can, then you just have to accept the outcome. You can't sit and be worried or terrified about what may happen or what may not happen, or speculate about the future. As long as you're doing everything you can only see what happens, and then there's no point of feeling terrified. I was, in the beginning, I was very worried, but when I started doing something, then there came hope from that, because hope comes from action. So if you don't want to feel terrified or worried or scared, then the only thing you can do is to take action, because that is the only medicine against that. We have to admit that this is not a crisis that we can build ourselves out of, or invest, or buy, or consume, or produce, because that is the same approach that got us into this crisis, and we cannot solve it with that same approach. It means if you are going to get healthy, you have to admit that you are sick, and that is something that our leaders cannot seem to do today, because they always have to tell this story of success to get re-elected, or to, as we explain in this letter, that we have already locked in a certain amount of warming. If you just look at the planned production of fossil fuels that the world's countries are planning to produce by the year 2030, according to the UN production gap report, that accounts for 120% more than what would be consistent with the 1.5 degree target. So that means that if we are to stay below these targets, we have to make it possible to tear up and abandon valid contracts and deals, and that is not possible within today's system. The corona pandemic is a crisis, and it needs to be treated as a crisis, and the climate crisis is also a crisis that needs to be treated as a crisis. But I don't think we should compare these two crises. We should be very careful with that. The coronavirus has, of course, no positive effects on the climate whatsoever, despite what people may say. This is a tragedy and nothing else. Both of these crises are symptoms of lack of respect for each other, and for the natural world, for fellow human beings, basically. But I think that we are now, with the Black Lives Matter protests, that really shows that people are starting to wake up to these injustices, and that we cannot no longer continue to sweep these things under the carpet and ignore it. And that could be it could be equality, it could be justice, racial justice, gender equality, also see that with the Me Too, but also sustainability, and thereby the climate crisis. So I think that people are starting to wake up to these things more and more right now.